Have you been listening to Dave Ramsey and you want to know what the baby steps to financial peace are? Have you been watching him for a while and you're kind of skeptical of if these baby steps really work? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Joe Hardy and I help everyday people become generous millionaires. In this video, I'm going to be detailing the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University baby steps. What does each step actually look like, and what's my feedback having gone through these steps myself for the last several years? I'm also going to be sharing with you some of the parts of the baby steps that I don't agree with. So let's get right in. Step number one is a $1,000 emergency fund. Now, Dave teaches to get a $1,000 emergency fund very quickly. You can reduce your spending or you can increase your income. You can increase your income with a side hustle. You could sell things around the house. You could pick up a second job. The second thing is you can reduce your spending. So you can look at what you're spending. You could say, we're not going to eat out until we get this $1,000 emergency fund saved. So the way that I did this baby step is I cut back on eating out. I just stopped eating out and didn't realize how much money I was actually spending every month eating out. So within 2 months, just by not eating out, I was able to save $1,000 in my savings account for my first emergency fund. And I was able to save $250 per paycheck. So I got that $1,000 emergency fund saved in about 2 months' time. So now that I've been through all the baby steps and looking back at this first one, I definitely think that your first emergency fund really just depends on where you're at in life. Some people, $1,000 is going to be great, but depending on your situation, depending on if you're a 1 or 2 income household, depending on how many people rely on you for an income, how likely would it be for you to be able to go and replace your job if you lost it tomorrow? Those are all factors that are going to weigh in on how much is appropriate for you to save in your emergency fund. For example, if you're a single person still living with your parents, you probably don't need as much of an emergency fund as if you were the only income provider for a household for you and your spouse with 3 kids. In that case, you would need a much bigger emergency fund. So step number 2 is all about eliminating your debt. It is the debt snowball. What is the debt snowball? Well, basically what that looks like is you're paying off all of the money that you owe. The Dave Ramsey definition of debt is any money that you owe besides the mortgage on your house. In this baby step, you need to pay off all credit cards, personal loans, student loans, car loans. You list all of your debts, smallest to largest. By starting off with your smallest loan first, your smallest debt first. So if you have a $1,000 credit card debt, and then maybe you have a $10,000 student loan, and then you maybe have another $50,000 student loan. You make all of your minimum payments. Any money you have left over, you throw at the smallest debt first, eliminate that debt, and then you go on to the next one. But you want to start small and get some small wins because that's really going to build your momentum and encourage you to keep trusting the process and get those bigger wins along the way. By doing the debt snowball in about a year, I was able to pay off about $10,000 in credit card debt. It was about an $18,000 car loan and then about $24,000 in student loan debt. So now that I've been through the debt snowball, I do agree with Dave that it makes sense to pay them off by the smallest to the largest because the more debt that you have, the more weight that feels like it's bearing down on you. However, one thing I will say is that I do think you need to make the decision based on the type of debt you have. For example, I think it's important to get out of your credit card debt first. These are going to have the highest interest rates, and if you have any type of personal loan, student loans are good to get paid off because you can never get rid of them. Even if you file bankruptcy, you don't get rid of your student loan debt. One of the ways to quickly get rid of a car loan is to sell the car and go buy something that you can afford to pay with cash. Let's say you own a car that's worth $20,000 and you have $12,000 left to pay on the loan. Sell the car and take that $8,000, go buy an $8,000 car with cash. Step 3 is going to be an emergency fund again. This time it's going to be building up to 3 to 6 months of expenses. Now this is where I start to disagree a little bit. You can't start working on paying off debt. Your car breaks down and now you need to go spend $10,000 on a decent car, and now you got to go into further debt. You need to have that money ready to go for a rainy day. Earlier on, it's more important to have the bigger emergency fund because if you're working on paying off debt, the last thing you want to do is to go into more debt. So you should have a big enough emergency fund that you never go into debt again before you get started on really attacking that debt snowball really hard. Now, I really think this is going to depend on each person. I actually think that depending on your financial situation, you might be okay with a 1-month emergency fund. You might need a 12-month or longer emergency fund. Figure out what are your minimum monthly expenses. If you had no frills, but you lost your job and you just needed to cover your bills, sit down and decide how much money do I need in a given month after taxes at the bare minimum. You probably need to pay your rent or your mortgage. That's really important. You might be able to cancel your gym membership if you were in a pinch. You could cancel your streaming services if you're in a pinch. So decide what are your minimum monthly bills that you've got to have. So here's some questions I would ask yourself before determining how big your emergency fund should be. One would be, what are your minimum monthly expenses if you eliminated everything else that you possibly could? Another one would be, how easy is it for you to go out and get another job? How many streams of income do you have in your household? So do both you and your spouse work, or is it just you and your whole family, your spouse and kids all relying on you? If that's the case, you need a bigger emergency fund. Do you guys have investments that pay you dividends or cash flow from rental properties? Those are all things that help protect and are kind of a natural built-in emergency fund. So depending on what stage you're at, I actually think the further along you are in your financial journey, the less of an emergency fund you need. I think it's more important in the beginning. Just make it a game. Keep track of your numbers, keeping a scorecard for yourself. You could search Dave Ramsey debt thermometer. I printed that off and I put that on my fridge and I put how much debt we were trying to pay off and I filled it up. And filling up that thermometer was actually a ton of fun and it encouraged me to get it done faster. This is part 1 and we're gonna do part 2 in the next video. Oh, did I forget to turn that on? But that's okay, I'm not gonna redo it.